patriotic, all-American young men I've ever met. He loves the American flag. He gives it as gifts. He tears up when they play the Star Spangled Banner. He won 9 medals and awards. He was in the National Guard for 12 years, the Army Reserve for another 8 or 9. Exemplary record as a prison guard. Here's General Taguba, who identifies systemic faults. Military intelligence interrogators and other interrogators from the CIA actively requested that these MP guards set physical and mental conditions for favorable interrogation of witnesses. What they said was take off the gloves, prepare them for interrogation, soften them up, all euphemisms. Because in 2003, the insurgency broke out. We were totally unprepared. We, meaning your military, was totally unprepared. And people are getting killed, soldiers are getting killed, Humvees are being blown up, tanks are being blown up. And from top down, they said, we need actual intelligence. They started arresting everybody, all the men in a village, many of whom had no information to give. So in this Tier 1A, it's the interrogation center. Military intelligence is interrogating them, CIA, and interrogators from the Titan Corporation. And they're getting nothing. And so Cheney is crazed, Rumsfeld is crazed, all the generals are crazed. They said, we need actual intelligence. So military intelligence goes to these soldiers, so you got to help us. They said, every time a soldier dies, their blood is on your hands unless you help us. And every time they got a confession or got information, they rewarded them, Grainer and Frederick. By not communicating standards, policies, and tactics to soldiers, these leaders conveyed a tacit approval of abusive behavior toward prisoners. Such abuses, General Taguba told me, do not occur where military discipline and oversight are standard operating procedure. Once you see those abuses, you don't say who are the bad apples, you say, where did the system break down? And that's where you want your analysis to go. So what was the situation there? Everything that was in the Stanford prison study was there in spades. De-individuation, dehumanization, moral disengagement, passive bystanders, lack of oversight by senior officers. They worked 12-hour shifts from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., 7 days a week for 40 days without a day off. I don't know a job in the world that wouldn't produce burnout. But that's only the beginning. High stress, chaotic conditions, filth, noise, toilets overflowing, not enough showers, water ration, blackout. You're in this thing, the frequent electricity blackouts. Chip Frederick is in charge of 1,000 prisoners, 12 Army reservists, 60 Iraqi policemen who are smuggling weapons and drugs in. Prisoners are escaping. He has no training for this. He's an Army reservist, as are all the other people that you saw in those pictures. What happens in the middle of the night? He goes to sleep in a prison cell in a different part of the prison with rats running around and cockroaches, toilets overflowing. He never leaves the prison. The prison is under constant bombardment. The British told us, don't use Abu Ghraib. There's a housing complex across the street. They use the towers in Abu Ghraib as siding. And they're bombing the place all the time. Grenades and mortars. In this complex, 5 soldiers, 20 Iraqis were killed. So there's this constant level of fear. And lastly, there's revenge. Revenge because these are the Arabs from 9/11. Revenge because these are the guys who somehow are involved in your buddies being killed. And also, some of these were accused of raping a boy, some of these accused of escaping. And they had permission for abuse, as I said, from the officers above them. So before going into Abu Ghraib, he's just like one of the Stanford prison experiment guards. Everything I knew about him, he's normal. I had a psychological test on him, normal, no sadistic personality traits. Nothing about his whole background before he got to Abu Ghraib was negative. It was a situation that corrupted him and the other prisoners. The trial lasted a few days. The judge took one hour to make a decision. Dishonorable discharge, 8 years in prison, take away 22 years of his retirement pay so he's broke when he gets out, and strip him of his medals publicly. Total disgrace. Chip Frederick writes to me from prison and says, I wish I could go back to die for my country to prove that I'm a good soldier. That's a good soldier. That's a patriot. Not the way he and the others were painted. A few more things. Just very quickly, how else can good people be seduced into evil deeds? It's true, again, I want to take a little piece to do demonization, then we'll get to the positive ending on heroes. Demonization is like a cortical cataract. A cataract on your eyes blurs your vision. A cataract on your brain blurs your identification of other people as similar to you. So you begin to look out and see somebody else. You don't see another person. You see an animal. You see an object. In Rwanda, Tutsis and Hutus were neighbors. And one day the Hutu government said, the Tutsis are like cockroaches. You must kill them. And they went around and gave every man a machete, every woman a club, and in 3 months, they killed 800,000 of their neighbors. It's one of the most efficient, horrible slaughters in modern history. In 3 months, 800,000 people. It works at an individual level. Individuals can dehumanize others, but it also works at a systemic, at a national level. There's a book I would recommend to you called Faces of the Enemy by Sam Keane. He looked at propaganda that every nation uses preparing its soldiers and its civilians for war. And what he says is you must promote the hostile imagination, the mind of the populace and soldiers. He said the most powerful weapon a soldier brings into battle is an image of an enemy that he wants to kill. And for the civilians, it's an image of the enemy that's fearsome enough that you want to send your young men and women to battle. So there's the faces of the enemy, but again, it's the enemy as reptile, as insect, as beast, that you want to be destroyed. A colleague of mine, Al Bandur, did a very simple study, which I'll describe very quickly. He has a group of students from Stanford who are now going to train a group of students from another college in group problem solving. When they get it right, you reward them. When they get it wrong, you punish them. The assistant takes their names, goes out of the room, and you hear over the intercom the assistant say, the students from the other school they're ready. So you don't know anything, call that neutral. Or you hear him say, the students from the other school here, they seem like animals to me. Wait a minute, they're college students. Somebody you don't know, a research assistant, is labeling them as animals. How could that affect your behavior? In the third condition, he says, the students from the other school are here, they seem like nice guys. Okay. So these are 3 conditions, subjects are randomly assigned. This is the amount of shock from 0 to 8, and this is the trials. In the neutral condition, they start at a low level and stay at a moderate level, simply labeling them animals. You start at the same low level, so if you did one trial, it doesn't make a difference, but you get the same effect as I showed you before. As you shock more and more and more, you get a significant linear increase. The good news is that if you humanize people, in the humanized condition, simply saying somebody is nice is better than not having any information. So sticks and stones can break your bones, but names can kill you. And that's the terrible thing about dehumanization. So we need a paradigm shift that I call for the Lucifer effect in psychology, psychiatry, law, medicine, and religion, and economics. The traditional model is focused on the person, and that's really the medical model. So when you come to see me, you got some symptoms, I treat you. He comes, I treat him. Now they're all the same symptoms. Should I just keep treating everybody, or should I say maybe there's a common cause? Maybe it's a flu epidemic, and therefore what do I have to do? I should inoculate healthy people, not just keep treating sick people. So the public health model recognizes situational and systemic vectors of disease in a society. Bullying is a systemic disease. Prejudice is a systemic disease. Sexism and racism are systemic disease in our society. And we treat them as if they were individual problems, rather than as public health problems. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, whoops. Okay, whoops, it's going backwards. Okay. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was a prisoner in Gulag and Stalin's Gulag Archipelago, says, the line between good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. That's the quote you always hear. The second part of that is, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. Problem is over. That was the Inquisition. But he says the line dividing good and evil is not out there. It cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his or her own heart? Question is, are you? And so he's saying evil is not an abstraction. Evil is part of a decision-making process that we all engage in, sometimes at a small level, sometimes at a bigger level. I also would love you to visit the Lucifer Effect website. It's a website I developed with one of my students. It has tons of stuff. Whole section on how to resist unwanted influence. We have a theology meets psychology. Lucifer goes to church. I have two Protestant ministers who write weekly blogs. I have a big reference list on evil, and a whole section on celebrating heroism that we're going to end with in a moment. Recently, Time magazine had its lead story, What Makes Us Good or Evil? Well, we've looked at evil, although obviously I rushed and I've only given you a small part. Let's switch now and look at good. So we want to reverse the process. How can we promote civic virtue? Teaching children to disobey unjust authority. Milgram's research is about one thing. It says that we have all been trained to be blindly obedient to authority. And we don't make the distinction. The guy, when he started, he was a just authority. He wanted to help people improve their memory. Halfway through, this guy's a monster. He said, I don't care what the guy in the other room, I don't care if he's dead, unconscious, you have to keep shocking him. And at that point, everybody should have quit. But the majority didn't. Because we've been trained from kindergarten on to obey authority without evaluating whether that authority is just or not. We have to reward social modeling of moral behavior in our children and in one another. We have to promote critical thinking that challenges false ideologies and bad means to good ends. We have to encourage respect for human diversity, to appreciate human variability, not tolerance. Not, I'm going to tolerate the fact that black people are moving in my neighborhood, Hispanic people. No, it's to celebrate the fact that people are different from me, and therefore I am enriched by understanding that difference, and not allow other people to stereotype or dehumanize others, or anybody, or yourself. We want to change social conditions that make people feel anonymous. I did early research on vandalism. Vandalism makes sense when you talk to vandals. They have a sense in which nothing I do makes a difference in my society. By destroying things, I have an impact that I could never have creating things. So that's where the graffiti comes from. That's where the broken windows come. Encouraging admission of making mistakes. The hardest thing in the world is to say, I made a mistake. I'm sorry, I apologize. I learned from it, I'll move on. All of cognitive dissonance is about continuing to justify bad mistakes, bad decisions. And so we stayed in Iraq 5 years after Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense, knew we couldn't win that war, if you read his memoirs. And 20,000 American soldiers died because they couldn't say, we made a mistake. We got to pull out. And you keep going until it was impossible. But the same is true in business. Promoting personal responsibility and personal accountability. Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld went before the Senate Armed Service Committee and said, these abuses that you saw happened on my watch. As Secretary of Defense, I am fully responsible. He's got a big job with Bechtel or something. He's making a fortune. He should be in a prison cell with Grainer and Lindy Anglin and Chip Frederick. You can't be responsible and not be accountable. Supporting independence over group conformity, and then, of course, reducing poverty, inequities, entitlements of the privileged. I want to end on a positive note. Heroism is the antidote to evil. We can go around. Evil is going to always exist. The idea that I have is by promoting the heroic imagination in the next generation, by creating in every child the self-belief that I am a hero in waiting. When the time comes, I will act heroically. I want to refocus away from evil to promoting heroes. I develop in the book the concept of the banality of heroism, which is that ordinary people, not special people, do extraordinary moral deeds in certain situations. Hannah Arendt, when trying to understand Adolf Eichmann, said, what's terrible about monsters like him is they look like your Uncle Charlie. He was normal before he went to Auschwitz. He's normal when you look at him now. It's just when he was put in that job, in that situation, he could eliminate 2 million Jews in 6 months and not think about it. Traditional heroes like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, they're the wrong heroes for us because they devote their whole life to sacrifice. We're not going to do that. Maybe some of you will, but not the average person. I'm not going to do it. I have other things to do in my life. For the kids, their heroes are Superman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman. They're the wrong heroes because they have special talents that kids never have. I want to propose instead that most heroes are everyday people. Most heroes emerge as only in particular situations. And in fact, most everyday heroes do a heroic deed when they do it once in their life and never again, because that situation happens only once in their life. This is a famous Chinese student called the Tank Man. In Tiananmen Square, what was that, 1989? Students were protesting lack of freedom.